Welcome to Space Insiders. My name's Tony Sewell, and as usual, here with my partner in crime, Rob Ruyak. How you going, Rob?
Great, Tony. Good to see you again, as
Yeah, you
always.
too. You've had a busy week. We both had a busy couple of weeks. What's
Yep.
been going on?
Uh, not sure what I can
You don't have to
share.
go into the full
Yeah.
details. So,
Yeah, but it's all good stuff.
yeah,
A lot of activity in the market. Lots to do. I think with the defense industry and everything that's going on, there's a heightened awareness that we need to think big and figure out how to be more strategic in everything that we do, especially as things change so quickly. So it's just, yeah, it's been a busy but good week.
we had some fabulous interest in the episode with Erica last week.
Hmm.
We've seen a spike in downloads. We're up to 320 followers on LinkedIn. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I mean it's good. We're starting to see some more interest in what we're doing, which is really exciting. We had the one of my little side projects is sort of partnering with another guy locally here in Atlanta to kind of build an industry sort of social group here in Atlanta. We had our second happy hour last week. Met some really interesting folks. Actually, our next got someone for our next episode after this one. Met the executive director of the Space Research Institute from Georgia Tech, which is awesome. Like this guy,
Mm.
he's like a 20-year veteran of Georgia Tech. And so it'll be really good. That I'm really looking forward to that episode too, when we get to talk about sort of building industry within a region like Georgia. And I learned that there has been a push to build a spaceport in Savannah of all places. So we might have to ask him about that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so tell us a little bit more, Tony, about the get together. Like, how are you guys doing it?
Yeah, so really just me and another guy, Colin Ake. He works for one of the local state colleges here. Runs a space accelerator or a startup accelerator, but he has a space industry background, and we both had a network, and we sort of got together about 6 months ago, and just like we know there's all this space industry here. I mean, Viasat and Hermeus, and I mean, and there's a lot of deep aerospace here in Georgia as well. Lockheed Martin has a big presence here.
Hmm.
They do a lot of work for the US government, a lot of research, but there's no forum to get people together in the industries. We've had a couple of happy hours now. I've had some really good interest. Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Great. Well, invite us. I'd love to
Yes,
come
for
down.
sure. Yeah, I'd love to have you
Yeah.
down. All right. So we've got a special guest today. I think we probably should be doing this in the bar. Phil Cooper, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Really, really good to be here. I'm sure there's a joke about an Aussie, a US guy in the UK on a call in a bar, but maybe we can do that later.
Yeah, I
Um,
love it.
I
no,
love it.
really, really pleased to be joining you. Been watching the podcasts, doing space launch, satellite comms. It's about time we did a bit of geospatial and Earth observation. So thanks for having me along.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Rob, you've worked really. I mean, we've all worked together. I know you really wanted to bring Phil onto the show. So, can you tell us a little bit about why Phil's here today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, one of the things that you and I love to do, Tony, is bring people that we really truly care about onto this podcast. I consider Phil to be a really close personal friend of mine. So I've been dying to have him on here. He's just a really good person. But, most importantly, he is a true visionary in the field of geospatial analytics. He's a geographer by trade, and looking forward to hearing more about that, Phil. Um, and I think the thing that I love about this topic area, and he and I spent a lot of time together in the past thinking about this, but he really is the one with the vision, is how do companies and other verticals truly use geospatial data and the analysis to make really important decisions, business decisions. And then some of the things we've also talked about, which I'm excited to dive into, is once you have a lot of this data, how much of it really will be visualization for decision making? How much could it be to automate inject some of that insight into automated processes without even a human in the loop. So there's a lot of super interesting things about this topic. We could probably talk, I don't know, a week about it, and I know Phil can.
True.
So yeah, so I'm just so excited to talk to Phil. Phil, good friend, excited to talk to you, and really thanks for joining us.
No, good to be here.
So, Phil,
Yes.
let's start at the start. So, you're a geography student. You've been in the industry over 25 years. What does it mean to be a geographer today? And I'm also interested to learn, like, how has the skill set for geographers changed since when you studied to today?
Yeah, no, it's good. I think it's a great question, Tony. I always label myself as a geographer for two or three reasons. The first of all is I was influenced by my education. I think we go right back. It was the most fun. Geography was the opportunity to get out in the field and stand in rivers with poles and measure activity. So getting out was really important. And I go all the way back to how I was taught at school, and my geography teacher was great. And then I looked at universities, so I really enjoyed that. I was going to do law. You wouldn't believe this. I was going to be a lawyer. I decided I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to make lots of money. And then 6 weeks before I applied to university, I decided actually I didn't want to do law. So my entire university decision was based on field trips. Sat
That's
down.
awesome.
Yeah. So
Wait, hold 1 second. I need to understand this because we all have this story in some way or shape or
I
form.
wanted to do law as well, and thank God I
Yeah,
didn't.
exactly.
And
Why
it
not
was-
law for you, Phil?
Yeah.
That should be a whole
Just-
session, Tony.
do you know-
why not law for you?
a big part of it was down to my dad. My dad had a big influence on me in terms of do something you enjoy. He would always say, "Please do something you enjoy." And he worked in insurance for 40 years, and I think he sort of said, whilst he was technically very thin, he was like, "Do something you enjoy because otherwise you can get stuck." The second thing was, I was just sitting there going, "Do I really want to do 3 years of legal exams?" No, I just didn't want to do it. I just stopped. So I got all the university prospectus docs. Like, this is a true story. Took all the perspectives down. I started looking at all the universities I was looking at, and I went, "How do I make a decision on geography?" So I just started looking at the field trips. I went, "Where do they go?" And I ended up choosing Leicester because they went to South Spain, which was great for one field trip. The Canaries.
awesome when you're in your late teens.
Yeah, I just decided that's what I wanted to do, and that made the decision. And if I'm honest, didn't look back. Being outside, being able to look at the world around you, has always been a fascination of mine. Once again, everything from glaciers to hanging out in Lulworth Cove, a very, very famous place in the United Kingdom, a place called Lulworth Cove. It's a classic location on the south coast where you can see an arch, but it's been perfectly formed. And I just sat there, was utterly fascinated by this. So wanted to enjoy it, stuck with it ever since. And keep telling my kids, although as yet I'm not winning with the kids so far. I've got 4 kids. My fourth one likes maps, so I'm hopeful for the next generation. But it's to be outside. It's to look around you. It's to understand how the landscape changes, what impacts those changes, and that really drove me over the years to enjoying geography and then eventually into remote sensing. And it was going from geography at university to doing a master's degree in remote sensing that started to look at, you can look at the world around you from so many perspectives, look at change detection, and the most impactful image to me, and we'll get on to what really drives me now, was I remember during the 90s, they were monitoring as an area in the Amazonian rainforest called Rondonia. And it's very, very famous because Landsat, which was the satellite image that was launched in 1972, and then there were these two images I saw, one from 1972, one from about 98, and it showed the deforestation of the Amazonian rainforest from Rondonia. That really impacted me because I could see change evidence in front of me. And I went, I want to know more about that. That's 30 years ago, looking at that, and I sort of look back again, what you did then and then what we're doing now. And so that, looking at the world around me, getting outside. I mean, you guys know I'm always out running and getting lost, and we'll talk about Strava in a bit. Other apps are available, and I've never lost that. So yeah, it's being outside, just watching the world, trying to make sense of it. I think make sense of, why is the world changing? What are the impacts to that change? I got much more involved in monitoring sea surface temperature, which is a hugely impactful way of monitoring, but as a barometer of the world. And people often miss that. Anyway, geography
No, I mean, I
teacher.
think
Yeah, so
it's interesting because I saw on one of my social feeds yesterday. Actually, there was a really interesting picture from like 2 years ago of the sort of the main thoroughfare in the Gaza Strip and what it looks like today. And I don't think, and you talk about like sea surface temperatures, and I don't think people. I think a lot of people probably don't necessarily connect that discipline of geography, which kind of seems like in today's world, it kind of, when you hear the word geography, it kind of seems like an old fashioned sort of idea. But um, those Earth observation and remote sensing, it impacts people's lives in a way that I think most people just don't realize. And if it wasn't there, how different life would be.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, definitely. And then you've got the data, and then things like, GPS has changed all our lives. From the letter you get for your utility bill that lands on your doorstep in the morning, through to the timing that takes place with the energy delivery. GPS has changed everything as well. And the volume of geospatial data that gets used, that impacts you daily, is massive, and it just keeps growing, and those sources keep growing. And that's the thing that we're in. Obviously, well, we're heavily involved on a daily basis, whether it's watching the news, whether it's imagery of events around the world, whether it's the research community that relies on that data, right the way through to go running in our apps. And where are we? We've got a phone, we've got an IP address. It's all just geospatial data. I mean, we did a piece of work with a colleague of mine called Dr. Andy Wells, which is, if you took geography out of the world, what would it look like? And it was a really fascinating experience, because you suddenly realized nothing worked.
I I could totally see 12-year-old Phil on a field trip somewhere.
his backpack, his floppy hat.
That's exactly
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
and I can also see Rob being a chaperone on that trip, a dad looking for that kid the entire time
lost. Yeah.
because he's lost somewhere in the forest or on a cliff somewhere. Totally.
Yep. But very, very close. I'm very good at getting lost. I was always convinced in the direction I was going, and I'd always get turned around. So I was always, even back then, it's like, I don't need a compass. I know where I'm going. I'm just going to follow.
Volunteering was a great. I used to love doing that at school. I don't know if they do it over here, Rob, but it was a big thing in Australia.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I remember that, in summer camp and, other types of, in school field trips. But it's interesting you bring that up, because the question I was going to ask you, Phil, was, well, how do you define geospatial? And I think it's important because I remember when I first got introduced this or started getting interested in it, for some reason my mind just would always go to a satellite image. And I think a lot of people, when I talk to them, when you say geospatial, they kind of think about, Google Maps, but that's not just what it is. So how do you break down this whole area? Like, what are the categories?
So the two things,
Or
EO, remote sensing, probably makes up about 5 to 10% of the entire market. We talk about space economy. It's about 5%. And a lot of the rest of it is everything from survey the world. If you look around you, whenever you're driving along, you'll see little tripods if they're designing new roads. That's surveying, that's geospatial, that's planning the world around you. It's location. There was a really worked with a guy in the Middle East once, and I said to him, same question: how do you find geospatial? And he said, well, whenever I get off a plane and turn my mobile phone on, the first thing my wife asks me is, where am I? And it's where. And how do you define where you are, where the asset is? And that
on my way home, usually
yes,
I'll be home in
exactly.
15 minutes,
Running
no matter
late.
where I am.
And I always say as well, geospatial has both made and wrecked my life. And there's when we wrecked your life. Well, we're always late. We're always stuck in traffic
Yeah.
jams. It's street works. It's where's the utility network. It is location. And how do you define that location? There's some really interesting new, GPS and latitude and longitude and coordinate systems have always been the way we define location. There's some interesting approaches. There's an organization called What Three Words, for example, who have tried to subdivide the entire globe into 3 meters squared. because they were the guy who ran it was fed up of going to gigs and not knowing where to go, where's the door of the stage to get into. So he tried to redefine location. So it's where and why is where important? There's some really interesting approaches now with safe walks in cities. There's some phenomenal development about how do I safely walk home. That's location. Women walking home late at night. There's a safety aspect to it. There's the classic where does mapping came from in the first place. If you remember John Snow's map of the cholera outbreak in London, which is you could say was the first GIS. So it's always been there. What it is now is how do you define where and how do you put data sets together? I always use the final example, which is the only way that a tree knows where a power line is its location in any database. And in databases, you have to define the location of the tree and the location of the power line. Why is that important? Because if your tree falls in the power line, you're going to get cut off electricity. These are all ways that geospatial impacts life every single day. And as we all have IP addresses now, so the average person has 3 IP addresses, okay? May not realize it globally. And those IP addresses can tell you where you are. So whether it's your phone, whether it's your watch, whether it's your laptop, and that's located somewhere. So you're defining where you are. That's a data point. If you aggregate those, so if I know my laptop is in a location in Washington DC, I can aggregate these two things together. Somebody may want to say, well, since you're in DC, do you want to buy a cup of coffee at this location nearby you, or do you want to go and visit that? Now, there's a concert on tonight, just from my IP address, from my location. That is how things are changing. And as we get more IP addresses and more sensors, it's only going to get more granular. So yeah, that's a big part of what I'm seeing, and that's that vast area of the geospatial industry that sometimes people even don't think about. But if you take it away, what would happen? How recently have you actually put a paper map up and started thinking, right, how do I get from here to here? And if you remember the 40 years ago plus, when I used to sit in the back of the car with the parents, they're arguing about, well, I know where I'm going and I've got the map up. You don't have that anymore.
There's always dad driving and yelling at mum because she can't navigate.
Exactly. And that continues to change. And then also, I'm seeing a huge growth in things like the global south as well. We got 3 billion people who are using location services for address delivery. If you go to Tanzania, for example, they have their entire businesses that say, well, we drop parcels at the service station. How do you locate that? That's a really interesting growth developmental area going forward. And they're just embracing these technology changes, embracing IP addresses, embracing location. So there's a lot there. And all of it has an impact, and it all bases on where you are, where the asset is, and how you aggregate the two together.
Yeah, and there's all the geospatial data, but I think and all the possibilities around it. What I think is really interesting is, especially with the advancements of cloud computing and artificial intelligence and all the kind of the derivatives of artificial intelligence. It looks like you can start to do modeling, simulations. That you can enable more digital twin type environments. And to me, I think that's super, super interesting for commercial enterprise and other verticals like energy or financial services. I think pretty much probably every vertical. Are there certain, where do you see that? Where do you see the biggest impact currently where geospatial is helping companies make interesting decisions, like really, important decisions? And is there an industry, Phil, that you feel is kind of out in front of the others as it relates to the use of geospatial data and insights?
The traditional thought about use of geospatial has always been the defense and security industry, always.
Hmm.
I like to look at the history of geography, so back from 1959, when the Corona satellite reconnaissance, the Bay of Pigs activity, was always defense and security. That was always the driver. Autonomous vehicles, car industry, that's the really interesting industry, and that's driving a huge amount of use of geointelligence.
Is it Explicitly, just sort of thinking about like the roles that people have in these companies or with these use cases. Is it becoming more of a data science discipline, or is it still explicit that they're like different disciplines within geography that people are sort of specializing in?
I think the world of data science is definitely accelerating because of the tools that we have available. The challenges that are in front of us now is two or three. The first thing is that sheer volume that's coming off these autonomous vehicles, and those data scientists are what tools can we actually use to consume that data and analyze it. I've got a very, very good friend of mine who is a very, very senior. He's actually the chief technical architect in a large automotive company. And he said that their challenges are not so much that the ideas of what to do with the data, it's just coping with the volume of data that's coming off these autonomous vehicles today. And how do you make that efficient? How do you bring the data off? How do we get intelligent about what data you take off the vehicles versus what do you leave on it? And we've seen it in space. We talk about in orbit operations. You talk about autonomous vehicles out in the field. It's exactly the same challenge, which is on board these autonomous vehicles today, there are so many sensors creating so many data. Their problem, they can't actually get it off. They can't get that volume of data off. So it's getting clever and smart about the data you take from the vehicle, you transmit, and then when it's in a cloud environment or a technological platform, how do you handle it? What do you do with it? There are new roles emerging, like profile engineers, who are defining. Look, assume that the data is growing and storing, fine. What do you do with it? There's a term of geo AI that keeps rumbling around at the moment, and then AI has a big part to play. But in our industry, like in many industries at the moment, I think there's this they're racing to catch up. Well, we know we can do all these things. We know we can move data off of cars, and we can autonomous vehicles, and the idea about driverless cars. And if you remember Johnny Cab from there, Total Recall,
Total
it's like
Recall.
That's
that's
right.
all perfectly feasible. But it's what do you do with it? And I think data scientists will be part of it, but I think there's going to be engineers who decide what does the car of the future look like? Do we need cars anymore? There's a big question. I mean, will our kids not own cars? They just
Driver's licenses. Yeah.
what's the point if there's a transportation system? I see that as being a massive, massive area of growth in our sector. Sorry, gone on quite a bit, but that I see that as massive.
On the Gen AI topic, Phil, um, you know, we have ChatGPT. We have all these large language models that I think a lot of us are all using on a daily basis for various types of, kind of the co-pilot concept, right? Help me get my job done. Um, I think have been very useful because a lot of them, unless I'm missing something, have been trained on the open internet, right? And there's some proprietary data too that trains these models, but I think when we think about using AI and agentic AI for like intelligent workflows, getting the human out of the loop in some of these examples. I think geospatial data would be really useful for some of that. It seems to me that a lot of this information is still very proprietary. So, how do we move from using AI and geospatial data to really improve a business process or deliver something that improves public safety or some public good? What do you think needs to happen um, to actually train these models to be effective to do those types of things? Where maybe a lot of the training does, require some of this proprietary data that's not necessarily open yet.
Um, that One of the things that we've seen is with the big AI organizations, let's say Anthropic at the moment, with the stuff we're doing with Claude, obviously, is the interface, and with OpenAI, is they're now looking very interestedly at geospatial data as another source of intelligence that feeds into the models. The work we've done with people like Made with Clay is a really good example of where we're making progress. And the model building is not necessarily the issue anymore; it's the agents that tap into it.
Hmm.
And that's just a little plug. We're doing a challenge in London in October October 8th at the Royal Geographical Society to start to dive into it. Because what we want organizations to think about is what does the interface look like to those models, and where are the challenges? Just because you can go into Anthropic and say, make me a map or something like that. The challenge it's had is it doesn't understand location. So I did some work some time ago with an organization called Element 84, really, really, really great customer organization to work with. And we were looking at the challenge of swimming pools in, I think it was Massachusetts. That was the challenge. Well, show me the swimming pools in Massachusetts. The model understood what a swimming pool was. It didn't understand what Massachusetts was. It didn't know how to define a Massachusetts. So we have to teach. We have to teach. It's like teaching. You've got to teach it what geography means, and that teaching process is where we're going at the moment. And when it understands geospatial, and we ask it how many swimming pools are in Massachusetts, and it understands the defined boundary of what Massachusetts is, it'll be better. And these are the things that are getting better. We're asking lots and lots of questions, but if it doesn't understand the context of spatial, like, show me all the vegetation within a meter of a power line. Okay, well, I can tell you what a power line is, and I can tell you what vegetation is, but what are the parameters I'm working in? These are the things we're going to start training the models to do. And I think that's where I'm starting to see the geospatial industry, which, by the way, I think GIS professionals' days are numbered, but I think geospatial professional days are about to get very, very busy, because they're going to be needed to teach them the models. What does that mean? And then what services are we going to get from the back of that, like we do with
That's a
Beyond
great,
IVO?
yeah. I mean, that's a great insight how the role is changing. So, like, what do you see the role of the geographer in the future? What are going to be some of those key, like, what are those key um, specialties or functions that geographers will play in some of these organizations?
I think we're going to have to be ambassadors for geography. I think we're going to have to be advocates. I think we're going to have to be innovators. I think we're going to have to bring on train the next generation of geographers not to just use GIS, not to see somehow. I think what happened with the rise of Esri and MapInfo and CADCore and the GIS tools of, well, say, of the 80s and the 90s. So my date are dating me now. That was the traditional way in which people with a geospatial background went into technology. I think those GIS tools are dramatically changing now, and I think we need to start pointing out to people that it's not the specialty of the cartographic GIS person or people in the corner of the office that it used to be in local authorities. Now it's directly impacting commodity training. It's impacting the financial markets depend on location. I think supply chain logistics, Robert, topic I know that you and I have talked about. The people within these organizations need to have geospatial people explaining why it's important, and therefore how to take advantage of the data sources that exist. I think there's a lot of education that needs to take place, and a lot of considering that great term, that profile. Who is going to be consuming that information in the future? What's important to them? Disaster response now is a huge area of geospatial that's impacting. I think there are the tooling that comes out, how to best use it with the geospatial data. That's training, that's advocacy, that's opportunities like this to talk about the importance, and then how do we link these things together? And I think that joining of technology and data and IoT, and I mean, IoT geospatial is back on the rise again. And I think that clarification to markets and sectors is going to be a big part of what geographers do going forward, not just GIS tools. Ed Parsons, who's the ex-head of geography at Google, and myself talk about this quite a bit, which is we think the GIS professional is perhaps days are numbered, but the geospatial professionals' days are about to get very, very busy, and we need more of them. So there we go.
So what's the? I mean, we spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about sort of from a startup angle and entrepreneurship angle. I mean, you can see how this discipline is being employed in like defense and intelligence and in the big like the big financial companies or insurance companies and whatnot. But from an entrepreneur, like a startup perspective, what are some of the applications or businesses that you see like really excite you about sort of where this is going and where the opportunity is?
So I think the organizations who embrace multiple data sources, so there's a company called Dante.ai in the US, and they're taking social media feeds and geospatial
Mm.
data to rapidly deliver intelligence to the defense and the disaster responses sector. So really, really, really smart company, very thoughtful about the data sources of data, and then they're packaging that up so that somebody can actually easily interpret it. So they're a really good example. Liveo, company I work with very well, a lot in Germany, they've looked at trade awareness and supply chain and efficiency and EUDR regulations. So organizations who are now understanding that geospatial data is just part of the mix, and they're looking to respond to legal regulations and supply chain challenges and efficiencies. I think the other big area that we're seeing with geospatial companies who are using the narrative of sustainability, not just about the environment is being impacted, and there's been I think there's some big challenges around climate change, but businesses who are turning to industry and saying, how do you become sustainable? So the work we're doing for Hexagon, for example, in Brazil with Vale Mining, which is all about the mining company is having to remediate the mines and hand them back. To do that, it needs data, it needs biodiversity intelligence, it needs satellite imagery, it needs digital twins. They are looking at the business problems, and they're doing a lot of great work with them. So our Evolution, which is part of Hexagon. So these are companies that are sort of emerging. I'm always say that the best company that's going to succeed is the one we haven't heard of yet.
Mm. Is the investment dollars there for capital?
So I think in this, if we talk about the space economy, which is definitely seeing a rise and maybe a drop off at the moment, that was one area that geospatial companies look for investment. I think a lot of them now are looking for AI investment pots as well. So one of the things I've learned about geospatial companies over the years, they're very adaptable. They can be very sharp with the messaging to the investment organization. So if investment companies are looking for AI opportunities, you can turn to geospatial. But the industry is always just steadily in the background. And I think there are some interesting companies emerging now, like Lux Carter, for example. They're focusing on mapping projects, or I'm trying to think of some other organizations I've seen recently who have used to go geospatial funding and now are going AI and data science funding. Aspia Space, for example, a company we work with in the United Kingdom, they are really going down on the biodiversity BNG front. So they said, right, this is an important problem. There's investment funds. There's a lot. There's always been environmental and sustainability funds. That's always been there. But now it's more government specific projects that they want to get funded. I think there's a huge investment in the European region at the moment. I don't know if you're aware, there's 165 billion euros being planned for the next 6-year program in Europe. I think that's where a lot of startups are going to get funded, and I think the leadership in geospatial potentially is shifting to the European region now. That's a very different conversation to have, but these are big funds. It's being recognized at a government level. Therefore, the startups are being smart about how they present their offering. And I think there's going to be dozens of new startups that emerge in the next couple of years to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think it's very exciting to what I think we'll start to see companies that aren't necessarily purely geospatial, but they might be companies that focus on a particular industry that takes geospatial data, meshes it with other things. Could be ERP data, right? It could be or location data that a company doesn't even know they really have, and then injects some of that into a business process under the covers that is just enhancing a decision to be made. For example, automating a work order process for sending a crew out to cut the trim the
Trees.
trees around
Yeah.
the power lines, right? I mean, that's probably a simple example, but I think there's going to be a lot more of that. And we didn't even touch on like in the financial industry, they've been using geospatial, right, for quite a long time too,
Yeah.
to figure out things like,
The
is there how
level
much
of
activity?
oil, like the
Yeah,
Yeah.
oil
The
vats
measuring
oil
the
and
tanks, the gas
shadows on
tanks.
the
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
it's super, super interesting. Well, I think it's an unbounded market of opportunity. Phil, we've loved having you and talking to you. I really feel like we could talk for hours on this topic. Um, and we Tony and I like to end this conversation typically with a fun question that like maybe helps people understand a little bit more about who you are as a person. So uh, the one that we came up with is this one. So I don't know about how Tony feels, but I feel like using GPS makes me absolutely dumber, like dumber. And whenever someone asks me for directions anywhere anymore, it's really hard for me to even remember the streets of my neighborhood, let alone getting to work. So here's the question. Based on the fact that you're a geographer and you do what you do you actually use GPS? And when you do, when you feel yourself kind of forgetting where you're going or the streets of names of streets, do you revert back to the old map in your own brain to figure out where you're going?
Well, I think I said at the start, I sometimes have an overinflated capability where I think I'm going, and I will always regularly ignore them. Um, a lot of my friends always know whenever we go for nights out in various cities. The adage now is never ask Phil which direction to go because you'll probably get it wrong.
That's awesome.
I have genuinely been on stag do's where I've got lost. My approach now in most cities, and this is top tip for anybody listening in location, and I used to do, is generally speaking, go downhill until you hit a river or
Yeah.
water, and and then you make the decision left or right, and the chances are you'll probably find something like a bridge or a central other thing. So I used to always do this with rowing club. I used to do a lot of rowing. That was our age. Just go downhill, keep going downhill. Eventually, you're going to get to a river, and then the chances are you go.
Reference points.
Yes. So I've
Yeah.
always done
Yeah.
that. Uh,
Yeah.
I had a recent one actually. I mentioned Strava. I go running quite regularly with some friends of mine, and I decided on this occasion that um, I was going to do a longer run. I was like, it's fine, guys, I'll be fine. I'll see you later, no problem at all. So off I trotted, and I thought, oh, I won't worry. I'll leave my phone behind. I don't need it. It's fine. I know where I'm going. 2 hours later, 2 hours later, I finally arrived back at the car park. There was a junior park run going. I had to beg a lift from this poor couple to say, "Can you please take me home?" Because I because I didn't have my GPS, I didn't have my phone. My wife was pulling her hair out. My running colleagues were basically apparently driving around all over the place, and therefore ever since, my wife has insisted that I don't go running alone around certain parts of the United Kingdom, so I get lost. So yes, I am.
It all goes back to that middle school Phil, interested in a rock in the forest, and you get
Yep.
lost like staring at it.
It is a lost. It's a lost art, though. Reading a
It
map,
is.
and like I feel lucky that it was such a big part of army, being in the army, and learning how to navigate. I wasn't necessarily great with it. I do remember just being like in awe of this guy. I did. I tried out for SAS. I didn't make it. Didn't make the grade. But one of the guys in my section who went on to be to get through and was quite successful. Just being in awe of this guy running with a map and a compass and like it's
It's a skill.
it's such a great skill.
It is.
And you do, like when I go, like I hunt, and you go, right, look for, you sort of remember those things. You're looking like at creek lines, and you think about contours and stuff. It is a really good skill.
No, I've got
I'll
to.
tell you the thing that amazes me the most is I love watching some of those shows, those historical shows or historical fiction or whatever it might be, like Band of Brothers, about World War II,
Yeah.
and just thinking about these guys in the middle of nowhere,
Yep.
literally with a map,
Yep.
and not only just trying to figure out where they are, but how to strategically position themselves, literally using a map and compass. It's incredible. It's incredible. I can't even imagine how that was done back then.
It's funny you mentioned the
Yeah.
special forces, actually, Tony. So I've got a good friend who did go in there, and he always told me this really interesting story, which is that when you go for selection in Hereford, they do not tell you where to go. As he said, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get in. And he was a medical support officer, very, very good friend of mine, and he used to support them. And he'd say, yeah, same thing, which is that if you don't know where you're going, you're not, and it is an art, and I think that it can be honed. in the desert where they trade. I've done a lot of research. I've got about special forces and how they developed in the desert landscape, which has got no features at all.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you on that one. It's an art, and I need to get back to it. I need to teach my kids to do better. So there we go. Yes.
Yeah, very good. Well, Phil, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, Rob and I talked about before that, like, there was a chance that I was going to be in DC, and it's like, mate, we should do this together and have a couple of drinks. And but gosh, we could have talked for hours, and maybe we'll have you come back, and we could do maybe we could bring in someone from one of these businesses, like Element 84. Actually, that would actually be really good.
Dan Poloni would be good.
Really good. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, look, Phil, thanks again. This has been really great. If people want to find you or learn more about what you're up to, where can they do that?
So they can look me up on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is Kinder Row. Short story behind that is that my nickname when I was at university was Kinder, because I was the youngest person in the boat by 3 years, and I've always been a rower. So there you go. That's a little secret that not a lot of people knew. So now everybody who sees this podcast,
now 325 people on LinkedIn will know.
Kinder Row. So look me up on. That's why that is. But yeah, look me up on LinkedIn. Always happy. I'm a STEM.
What's the next big event you're going to be at?
So we've got a generative AI geospatial challenge on the 8th of October. We're doing that with women in geospatial. I'm a big advocate for women in geospatial. I think it's part of that next generation that's coming through. So look that one up.
Where's that, Phil?
That's going to be at the Royal Geographical Society in London.
Send me the details on that, and I'll put that in the show notes, and we'll give it a plug.
Fabulous. So yes, we're going to be doing that, and always happy to talk about the ways in which we get geography, and obviously a beer at some point. Always happy to do that, guys.
Absolutely. Well, Phil, hopefully we can catch up again soon, and thanks for joining us. And thank you to the listeners. If you like what you're hearing, please write us a review or give us a rating. It would really help us get the word out on the show. And with that, thank you, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Cheers.